The massive conference hall on Station Omega floated in the neutral zone between three galactic empires. Ambassador Chun stood before the assembly of 1,000 alien delegates, her weathered face showing no emotion as she delivered humanity's final words to the Galactic Council. For 50 years, Earth has honored the Pact of non-aggression, she said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber through universal translators. We've endured your trade restrictions. We've accepted being confined to our small corner of space. We've watched as you denied us access to hyperspace lanes and advanced technologies. The Zalathi representative, a towering creature with crystalline skin that reflected the station's lights, interrupted with a dismissive gesture of its forearms. Humans are too volatile for unrestricted access. The Council decided this long ago. Chin's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Behind her, the human delegation of 12 remained perfectly still, like statues carved from determination itself. They knew what was coming. They had prepared for this moment. You mistake our patience for weakness, Chun continued. You see our willingness to negotiate as proof that we can be controlled. Today, that changes. The council chamber erupted in various sounds, chirps, hisses, and mechanical whirs as different species expressed their displeasure. The Kren Empire's representative, a blob-like entity that communicated through color changes, flashed angry red patterns across its translucent body. Humanity speaks of change, the Kren's mechanical voice box translated. You have no fleet worthy of mention, no allies in this chamber, no technology that matches even our civilian vessels. What change could you possibly bring? Chen reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small device, no larger than her palm. The security systems immediately activated, energy shields flickering to life around the alien delegates. But Chen simply placed the device on the podium and pressed a single button. A hologram materialized above the chamber, a star map showing the entire galaxy. Earth's location pulsed with a soft blue light in what the aliens had designated as the quarantine zone. Then, one by one, other lights began appearing across the map. Dozens, hundreds, thousands. Every light you see represents a human settlement, Chen announced as gasps and untranslatable sounds filled the chamber. For 50 years, while you believed us contained, we've been busy, not building warships as you feared, not developing weapons as you expected. We've been doing what humans do best, adapting, surviving, and spreading. The Forlac hegemony's speaker, an insectoid being with compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans couldn't imagine, stood abruptly. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected any ships leaving your system. Your sensors detect what you expect to detect, Chen replied. Hyperspace travel, antimatter drives, quantum tunneling, all the technologies you use and guard so jealously. But humans have always been creative when cornered. We found other ways. The hologram zoomed in on one of the lights, showing a human colony on a world the Council had declared uninhabitable. Children played in domed cities while their parents worked in underground farms. The scene shifted to another world, where humans in specialized suits harvested energy from a binary star system that other species had deemed too unstable to approach. Generation ships, Chen explained, launched in secret over decades, traveling slower than light, carrying volunteers who knew they would die before reaching their destinations. Their children and their children's children would be the ones to arrive. No hyperspace signatures for you to detect. No antimatter emissions to track. Just human determination moving through the void. The chamber fell silent. The implications were staggering. If humanity had managed to establish even a fraction of the colonies shown on the map, they had effectively circumvented the quarantine. The pact that had kept them contained was already broken, had been broken for years without anyone noticing. Admiral Thrain of the Korati Federation, a species known for their military prowess and tactical brilliance, leaned forward. His scaled head tilted as he studied the map with 6 eyes that had seen 1,000 battles. These colonies, they're positioned at strategic points. Trade routes, resource nodes, military choke points. Humanity learns from history, Chin said. Both our own and yours. We studied every conflict in the Council's records. We know how you wage war, how you establish supply lines, how you project power. And we prepared. The Zalathi representative's crystalline form darkened, a sign of deep disturbance. You planned this from the beginning, the moment you signed the pact. We signed it to buy time, Chen confirmed. Time to implement a plan that began the day you first told us we weren't welcome among the stars. You see, that's the thing about humans. Tell us we can't do something, and we'll find a way. Lock us in a cage, and we'll spend every moment figuring out how to escape. Try to contain us, and we'll spread like water, finding every crack in your walls. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the assembly. But we didn't come here today to threaten. We came to inform. The age of human containment is over. We're already out there, on thousands of worlds, in hundreds of systems. The question now is whether we coexist peacefully or whether you force us to demonstrate why our ancestors were so feared that you felt the need to cage us in the first place. The Kren representative's colors shifted rapidly through a spectrum of emotions. You dare threaten the combined might of the Galactic Council? Your scattered colonies would be wiped out within cycles. Chun smiled then, the first emotion she had shown since entering the chamber. It wasn't a warm smile. Would they? Think carefully. You don't know where they all are. The map shows you perhaps a tenth of our true expansion. More importantly, you don't know what we've been developing on those worlds, far from your surveillance, free from your restrictions. She gestured to the hologram again. This time it showed footage from one of the colonies. Humans working alongside machines of unusual design, technology that followed no known galactic standard. The aliens watched in growing unease as the humans demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible without access to council science. Necessity breeds innovation, Chun said. Cut us off from your technology, and we'll create our own. Deny us your knowledge, and we'll discover truths you've never imagined. That's what makes humanity dangerous. Not our weapons or our anger, but our ability to adapt, to overcome, to find another way when all paths are blocked. The council chamber descended into chaos as representatives began arguing among themselves. Some called for immediate military action, others for negotiation. A few of the smaller species, those who had suffered under the council's rigid hierarchy, watched with what might have been hope in their alien eyes. Through it all, Chun stood calmly at the podium, her delegation unmoving behind her. They had delivered their message. The galaxy now knew that humanity's cage had been an illusion, that the chains meant to bind them had only taught them how to be free. Admiral Thrain raised a clawed appendage for silence. When the chamber finally quieted, he spoke with the measured tones of a warrior who recognized a worthy opponent. What does humanity want? What we've always wanted, Chen replied. A seat at the table, fair access to trade routes, the right to travel freely among the stars, recognition as equals, not as pets to be kept in a pen. And if the council refuses, the Zalathi representative asked, though the tremor in its harmonic voice suggested it already knew the answer. Chen's expression hardened. Then, we'll take it anyway. The easy way or the hard way. That's your choice. But make no mistake, the age of human subjugation is over. We've spread too far, adapted too well, and learned too much. You can work with us, or you can try to fight us across 1,000 fronts on 10,000 worlds. But you can't put us back in the cage. She picked up the device from the podium, and the hologram vanished. You have one standard rotation to discuss our terms. We'll be waiting. With that, the human delegation turned and walked out of the chamber in perfect synchronization, leaving behind a galaxy that had just discovered it had been outmaneuvered by the species it had tried to contain. In the observation decks above the council chamber, hidden reporters from 100 worlds scrambled to broadcast what they had witnessed. The news spread faster than light through quantum communication networks. Humanity had broken free, and they had done it not through war or destruction, but through sheer, unstoppable determination. On Earth, in hidden bunkers and secret facilities, military commanders watched the broadcast and waited. 50 years of preparation, of sacrifice, of families sent to the stars knowing they would never see home again, It had all led to this moment. If the Council chose peace, humanity would honor it. But if they chose war, Admiral Sarah Chun, sister to the ambassador and commander of Earth's Hidden Fleet, stood before a tactical display showing the real map, the one with every human settlement, every secret base, every carefully positioned asset. Her officers stood ready at their stations, men and women who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come. "Begin Phase 2 preparations," she ordered quietly. "And pray Ambassador Chen's diplomacy works. Because if it doesn't, the galaxy is about to learn why our ancestors reached the stars not as conquerors, but as survivors. And survivors, when cornered, are the most dangerous species of all. Across human space, on worlds the Council didn't know existed, in stations hidden in asteroid fields, and nebulae, humanity's true strength stirred to life. Not vast armadas or superweapons, but something far more dangerous. Millions of humans who had grown up free among the stars, who had never known the cage Earth had been forced into, and who would die before accepting such confinement. The Pact had failed not because humanity had broken it, but because the Council had never understood what they were trying to contain. You can cage a body, restrict technology, limit movement. But you cannot cage the human spirit, cannot restrict human ingenuity, cannot limit the drive that had taken a species from caves to the stars. The galaxy had watched humanity for 50 years, thinking them contained. Now, as reports flooded in from frontier worlds of human settlements appearing seemingly overnight, of trade routes disrupted by human colonies sitting astride key jump points, of resource-rich systems already claimed by generations-born colonists, the truth became clear. Humanity had not been contained. They had been preparing. And now, with the Pact's failure laid bare for all to see, the real question was whether the galaxy was prepared for humanity unleashed. In the Council chamber, as alien representatives debated and argued, a single thought echoed through many minds in many languages. What have we done? They had tried to cage humanity. Instead, they had given them 50 years to spread unseen through the galaxy, to adapt and overcome every restriction, to position themselves not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as equals demanding recognition. The Pact had collapsed. The galaxy had watched. And now, humanity was ready to show them why their ancestors had looked at the stars not with fear, but with hungry eyes and reaching hands. The age of human containment was over. The age of human expansion had begun. And somewhere in the void, on 1,000 ships heading to 10,000 worlds, humans looked at the stars and smiled. They were free. They'd always been free. It had just taken the galaxy 50 years to realize it. The news of humanity's revelation spread through the galaxy like wildfire through dry grass. On the paradise world of Kepler 442b, now revealed as one of humanity's hidden colonies, Governor Maria Santos stood on the observation deck of the capital city, watching alien news broadcasts with grim satisfaction. 20 years, she murmured to her aide, a young man born on this world who had never seen Earth. 20 years of building in secret, and now they know we exist. Below them stretched New Havana, a city of 3 million humans that had grown from a colony ship carrying just 5,000. The original colonists had been volunteers, knowing they would spend 40 years in cryo-sleep while their ship crawled through normal space. They had left Earth when the Pact was young, when humanity still believed the aliens might eventually accept them. Now their children and grandchildren lived free among the stars, and the galaxy was learning what humanity had built in the shadows. "Governor," her aide said, touching his earpiece. "Priority message from the Proxima Centauri station. The Zalathi Empire is mobilizing their third fleet." Santos nodded slowly. They had expected this. The Zalathi were the most militant members of the Council, the ones who had pushed hardest for human containment. They wouldn't accept humanity's newfound freedom without a fight. "Send the activation code to all defensive platforms," she ordered, "and contact the other sector governors. If the Zalathi want to test us, they're about to learn why we chose these worlds so carefully." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of human colonies. On the ice world of Gamma Ceti 4, miners who had spent generations extracting rare elements from the frozen crust received weapons that had been hidden in sealed vaults. On the jungle moon of Beta Hydri, scientists put aside their research into the local ecosystem and began activating defense grids that had been built into the colony from day one. But the real shock came when the aliens realized where humanity had built their strongest positions. The Nexus Point was considered the most important system in known space, a rare confluence of hyperspace lanes that connected all three major galactic powers. Whoever controlled the Nexus control trade and military movement for a third of the galaxy. It had been neutral territory for 1,000 years, administered by the Council and protected by the combined fleets of all member species, which is why every monitoring station in the galaxy went to maximum alert when a human fleet appeared at the edge of the system. Not emerged from hyperspace. Appeared. One moment, empty space. The next, 200 human vessels in perfect formation, as if they had always been there. On the bridge of the UES Resilience, Admiral David Park watched the alien armada scramble to respond. 37 different species maintaining the peace. Over 1,000 ships representing the pinnacle of galactic military might. Against them, his fleet of vessels built in hidden shipyards using principles the aliens had never imagined. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're being hailed on all frequencies. The Council forces are demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions." "Open a channel to all ships," Park ordered. The bridge crew, all born in space and trained for this moment since childhood, moved with practiced efficiency. "This is Admiral Park of the United Earth Stellar Navy," he announced. "We are here to establish a human presence at the Nexus Point, as is our right as a spacefaring species. We come in peace, but we will defend ourselves if attacked." The response was immediate and predictable. The Forlac Hegemony Commander, Senior Battlemaster Krex, appeared on the main screen. The insectoid alien's compound eyes glittered with what humans had learned to recognize as rage. "You dare bring warships to the Nexus? This is an act of war against the entire galaxy." "No," Park replied calmly. "This is an act of equality. For 50 years, you've denied us access to the trade routes that are the lifeblood of galactic civilization. That ends today. Your primitive ships will be destroyed in minutes," Krex chittered. "Leave now, or face annihilation." Park smiled slightly. "Primitive? Battlemaster, you're about to receive an education." He nodded to his tactical officer. On every alien ship in the system, proximity alarms suddenly screamed warnings. Hundreds of small objects had appeared around them, not approaching through space, but simply manifesting as if they had always been there. "Quantum phase mines," Park explained conversationally. "One of the advantages of being denied your technology is that we had to think differently. While you've been refining hyperspace drives for millennia, we've been exploring other options. Phase shift technology, for instance. The ability to exist slightly out of sync with normal spacetime." On the Forlac command ship, Krex watched in horror as the sensors tried and failed to lock onto the human devices. They were there and not there, existing in a state that violated every principle of physics the galaxy understood. "Those mines are now entangled with your ships," Park continued. "If you fire on us, if you move aggressively, they'll complete their phase shift. I don't think I need to explain what happens when several kilotons of matter suddenly try to occupy the same space as your hull." "Impossible," the Corati Federation admiral interjected, his scaled face showing calculation rather than Krex's rage. "The power requirements alone will be impossible using your methods," Park agreed. "But we don't use your methods. We couldn't, so we found our own." To demonstrate, the resilience flickered. For a moment, it seemed to exist in multiple places at once, ghostly afterimages spreading across space before snapping back together. The alien sensors went wild, unable to process what they were seeing. "Phase shift drive," Park said. "Slower than hyperspace for long distances, but perfect for tactical movement. And it has other advantages." One of the human ships suddenly appeared inside the defensive formation of the Council fleet, so close to a Zalathi cruiser that their shields sparked against each other. Before anyone could react, it phase shifted away again, reappearing in its original position. The message was clear. Human ships could appear anywhere, at any time, bypassing shields and defensive formations as if they didn't exist. "This is just the beginning," Park said. "Every human colony you've discovered has defenses based on principles you've never encountered. Every ship we've built incorporates technologies you've never seen. Not because we're more advanced, but because we had to think differently. Limitation breeds innovation, and you limited us for 50 years. The human fleet began to spread out, taking positions around the nexus point. They moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Which, in a way, they were. On Earth, in a chamber that existed partially in phase space, Admiral Sarah Chun watched through quantum-entangled sensors as her brother's diplomatic efforts and Admiral Park's display of force played out simultaneously. Around her, linked through neural interfaces that the aliens would have considered impossible, 100 tactical coordinators managed fleets across the galaxy in real time. "The Zalathi Third Fleet is approaching New Havana," one coordinator reported. "Governor Santos has activated the planetary defense grid. The Kren are massing at the Vega Junction," another added. "Colony ships' persistence and defiance are moving to intercept." Sarah processed it all instantly, the neural link allowing her to experience 100 battles as if she were there. This was humanity's other secret. Not just the colonies or the phase technology, but the networking that linked every human in space into a single, coordinated whole. The aliens had always feared human pack mentality, the way they could work together instinctively. They had no idea that humanity had taken that trait and amplified it through technology, creating a hive mind that retained individual consciousness while sharing collective awareness. Back at the nexus point, negotiations had reached a critical juncture. The Council forces were dividing, some wanting to attack immediately, others recognizing the futility of fighting an enemy that could appear and disappear at will. Admiral Thrain of the Cora T Federation broke the deadlock. "Stand down all weapons," he ordered his ships. Then, to Park, "You've made your point, Admiral. Humanity has capabilities we didn't anticipate. But surely you understand our position. We can't simply hand over access to the nexus point." "We're not asking you to hand over anything," Park replied. "We're informing you that we'll be establishing a station here, as is our right. You can accept us as equals, or you can try to stop us. But look at your tactical displays. Really look at them. The aliens did, and what they saw shook them. The phase mines were just the beginning. Scattered throughout the system, barely detectable even when looking for them, were thousands of devices that didn't match any known technology. Some were clearly weapons. Others might be sensors or communication relays, or something else entirely. "How long have these been here?" Thrain asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Years," Park confirmed. "We've been preparing for this day for a very long time. Every major system in the galaxy has human assets you've never detected. Not invasion fleets, we're not conquerors, but insurance policies. Guarantees that when this day came, we could claim our place among the stars." On the planet below, in the Nexus Point's main trading station, something even more shocking was happening. The station administrator, a Quellian whose species had managed commerce for the Council for centuries, stared at his screens in disbelief. "Sir," his assistant warbled, "we're receiving trade applications. Hundreds of them, all from human companies that apparently already have offices here." It was true. For years, humans have been on the Nexus Point. Not as visitors or traders, but as residents. They had come in ones and twos, unremarkable among the millions of beings that passed through the station. They had started small businesses, worked in maintenance, served in restaurants. And they had waited. Now they revealed themselves. The janitor who had cleaned the administration building for 5 years was actually a trained economist. The couple who ran a small cafe were former military intelligence. The street musician who performed for tips was a xenobiologist who had spent a decade studying every species that passed by. Humanity hadn't just spread to uninhabited worlds. They had infiltrated the heart of galactic civilization, hiding in plain sight, learning and preparing. Marcus Chun, no relation to the admiral or ambassador, stood up from his desk in the tiny shipping office he had run for 3 years. He pressed a button that had been hidden under a false panel, sending a signal to every hidden human on the station. Within minutes, they began to converge on the central plaza. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Humans who had been pretending to be simple workers, travelers, even beggars. They didn't come armed or threatening. They simply stood together, silent and unified, a demonstration of how thoroughly humanity had woven itself into the fabric of galactic society. The message was clear. We are already here. We have always been here. You just didn't see us because you weren't looking. Back in space, the standoff continued. But the balance had shifted. The alien fleets had superior numbers and firepower, but they faced an enemy that could strike from anywhere, that had spent 50 years preparing for this exact moment, and that had demonstrated abilities that violated the known laws of physics. More importantly, they faced an enemy that had already won the strategic game. The human colonies were perfectly positioned. The phase shift technology gave them tactical superiority. The infiltration of major trade hubs meant economic warfare was possible, and the neural linking meant humanity could coordinate on a scale the individualistic alien species couldn't match. Battlemaster Krex, for all his earlier bluster, was a seasoned warrior. He knew when he was outmaneuvered. "What are your terms?" he asked grudgingly. "The same terms Ambassador Chun presented to the council," Park replied. "Recognition as equals. Free access to hyperspace lanes. Fair trade agreements. A voice in galactic affairs. Nothing more, nothing less." "And if we agree?" Thrain asked. "What happens to these weapons you've seeded throughout our space?" "They remain," Park said simply. "Trust takes time to build. You've had 50 years to prove you could be trusted with power over us. Now we'll take the same time to decide if you can be trusted with equality. The weapons stay until we're sure you won't try to cage us again." The implicit threat hung in the space between the fleets. Humanity had turned the entire galaxy into a Mexican standoff. Any attempt to destroy human colonies or fleets would trigger retaliation from hidden assets. The phase shift technology meant no world was safe, no fleet was secure. But more than that, humanity had proven they could play the long game better than species that lived for centuries. While the aliens had grown complacent in their superiority, humans had spent every moment of their confinement preparing for freedom. "I need to consult with my government," Thrain said finally. "As do I," Krex added reluctantly. "Take your time," Park said. "We've waited 50 years. We can wait a little longer. But understand this, the decision has already been made. Humanity will take its place among the stars. The only question is whether we do it as friends or as neighbors who watch each other very, very carefully." The alien fleets began to pull back, maintaining defensive positions, but no longer actively threatening. The human fleet held its ground, patient and ready. On Earth, Sarah Chun watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Phase 1 had been the revelation, showing the galaxy that humanity had already escaped its cage. Phase 2 was the demonstration, proving they had the means to defend their freedom. Phase 3 would depend on how the aliens responded. If they chose peace, humanity was prepared to be the best neighbors the galaxy had ever seen. Their innovation, creativity, and determination would benefit everyone. But if they chose war, Sarah looked at another display, this one showing the true extent of human preparation. The colonies and phase shift technology were just the tip of the iceberg. In hidden facilities throughout human space, weapons that made phase mines look like firecrackers waited for activation. Ships that existed partially in other dimensions, ready to strike from angles that three-dimensional thinking couldn't anticipate. Viruses designed to corrupt the quantum computers that ran alien civilizations. Economic weapons that could crash entire stellar economies. And, above all, the sheer, unstoppable will of a species that had been told they couldn't have the stars and had decided to take them anyway. The Council had feared human aggression. They should have feared human creativity. They had tried to contain humanity's bodies. They should have tried to contain their minds. But it was too late for should-haves. The Pact had failed. The galaxy had watched. And humanity had struck not with the fury of war, but with the inevitability of a tide that no seawall could hold back. The age of containment was over. The age of coexistence was about to begin. Whether it would be a golden age or an age of ash remained to be seen. The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council convened in emergency session 72 hours after humanity's revelation. Representatives from every member species gathered in the ancient chamber on Centaurus Station, a structure that had stood for 10,000 years as a symbol of galactic unity. Today, that unity was fracturing. The humans have made fools of us all. The Zalathi representatives' crystalline form blazed with angry light. While we debated their containment, they spread like a virus through our space. Perhaps the ancient eldest of the Serloni spoke, her voice carrying the wisdom of a species that measured time in millennia. We should ask ourselves why we failed to see what they were doing. We were so focused on watching for the threats, we understood that we missed the adaptation happening before our eyes. Ambassador Chen stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by hostile aliens, but showing no fear. Beside her stood someone new, a young woman who had never set foot on Earth, born and raised on one of the hidden colonies. This is Commander Luna Reyes, Chun introduced. Born on Kepler 442b, trained on ships that never touched Earth's sky. She represents the new generation of humanity, those who grew up free among the stars. I brought her here so you could understand something important. Luna stepped forward, her movements carrying the easy grace of someone who had grown up in variable gravity. When she spoke, her accent was subtly different from Earth's standard, shaped by 20 years of colonial life. I have never seen Earth except in pictures, she said. My parents left when the Pact was young, believing they were giving their children a better future. I grew up working in mines that you said humans could never survive in. I learned mathematics from equations scratched on tunnel walls because we had no proper schools. I watched my older brother die from a disease that galactic medical technology could have cured in minutes, but which we couldn't access because of your restrictions. Her voice carried no anger, which made it somehow more powerful. You asked why we hid our colonies? Because we knew you would destroy them if you found them. You asked why we developed weapons? Because we knew this day would come. You asked why we spread so far? Because that's what life does, it finds a way. The Forlac hegemony's representative chittered anxiously. You speak of survival, but your people have positioned themselves to threaten our worlds. No, Luna said firmly. We position ourselves to protect our own. Every human settlement is placed for defense, not attack. We learned from your history. Every species that trusted the Council's protection eventually found themselves betrayed when politics shifted. We won't make that mistake. Chancellor Vaith of the Kryn Empire rippled through several colors before speaking. You claim defense, but your phase shift technology could destroy entire fleets. It could, Chen agreed, taking over smoothly. Just as your antimatter bombs could destroy entire planets. As the Korathi stellar converters could murder suns. As the Zalathi's quantum viruses could unravel the fabric of space itself. Every species here has weapons of unimaginable destruction. The only difference is that now, so do we. She paused, letting that sink in. But notice what we haven't done. We haven't attacked. We haven't demanded tribute or territory that wasn't ours. We've asked for equality, nothing more. Equality earned through deception, the Zalathi representative accused. Equality earned through survival, Chun corrected. Tell me, when your species was young, did you announce your vulnerabilities to predators? Did you broadcast your weaknesses to those who would destroy you? Or did you hide, adapt, and grow strong in secret until you could defend yourselves? The chamber fell silent. Every species present had its own history of struggle, its own story of rising from prey to predator, from primitive to advanced. The eldest spoke again. The human raises a valid point. We have forgotten our own histories, become comfortable in our power. Perhaps we needed this reminder that the universe still holds surprises. Philosophy later, Battlemaster Krex of the Forlac interrupted. We must deal with the immediate threat. The humans have weapons throughout our space. They have the capability to strike anywhere. This cannot be allowed. Cannot. Chen's voice carried a dangerous edge. Battlemaster, let me be very clear. The decision has been made. Humanity has claimed its place among the stars. You can accept this new reality, or you can test whether your fleets can fight an enemy that exists partially outside normal space-time. Choose wisely. As if to emphasize her point, alerts began sounding throughout the chamber. On the main display, tactical data streamed in from across the galaxy. Human colonies were activating defensive systems, revealing capabilities that made the phase shift technology look primitive by comparison. On Gamma Ceti 4, the ice miners had activated something called a thermal resonance field. The entire planet's ice shell had become a weapon, capable of flash freezing anything that entered the atmosphere. On the jungle moon of Beta Hydri, the scientists had revealed that their ecosystem research had been covered for something else. They had been cultivating a defensive organism that could consume any technology not specifically coded as friendly. The entire moon was now covered in a living shield that would devour invading forces. But the most shocking revelation came from the asteroid belt of the Sol system itself, humanity's home. For 50 years, the aliens had maintained monitoring stations at the edge of Earth's system, ensuring humans couldn't leave without permission. Now those stations reported something impossible. The asteroid belt was moving. Not randomly, with purpose. Thousands of asteroids were slowly adjusting their orbits, aligning into patterns that suggested something. A weapon? A shield? Something else entirely? Project Fortress, Chen explained calmly. 50 years ago, when you established your blockade, we realized we needed insurance. So we started moving asteroids. Slowly, carefully. A few meters here, a few kilometers there. Nothing your monitors would flag as suspicious. The display zoomed in, showing the new configuration. The asteroids had been arranged into a three-dimensional array that transformed the entire Sol system into a massive defensive installation. Each asteroid had been hollowed out, equipped with weapons and shields, and positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that could annihilate any fleet that tried to approach Earth. You turned your entire system into a weapon. Admiral Thrain of the Korati Federation sounded genuinely impressed despite himself. We turned our system into a home that could defend itself, Chun corrected. There's a difference. We don't want to attack anyone. We want to be left alone to grow and explore and trade as equals. But if you force us to fight, you'll discover that humans are very, very good at war when we have no other choice. The debate raged for hours. Some species called for immediate military action, convinced that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed freedom. Others argued for negotiation, recognizing that the humans had already won the strategic game. Through it all, Chun and Luna stood calmly in the center, answering questions and deflecting threats with equal composure. Finally, the eldest called for order. I propose a test, she said. The humans claim they want peace and equality. Let's see if their actions match their words. Grant them provisional membership in the Council for one solar rotation. Full access to trade routes, but also full responsibilities. If they prove themselves trustworthy, the membership becomes permanent. If they prove aggressive or destructive, we unite to contain them properly this time. And their weapons? Krex demanded. Remain where they are, the eldest said. As duos. Mutual deterrence has kept this galaxy at peace for 1,000 years. Perhaps it's time we extended that courtesy to humanity. The vote was close, closer than Chun had hoped. But in the end, pragmatism won. The cost of trying to force humanity back into containment was too high, the outcome too uncertain. Better to try cooperation and keep weapons ready than to start a war that might consume the galaxy. Provisional membership is granted. The Council President announced formally. Humanity will have one rotation to prove they can be trusted with freedom. Chun bowed slightly. We accept, and to show our good faith, I'm authorized to make an offer. Human colonies have developed numerous technologies out of necessity. Ways to survive in environments you consider uninhabitable, medical techniques for treating conditions without access to galactic medicine, agricultural methods that can feed populations on barren worlds. We're willing to share all of it. The chamber stirred with interest. Several species had struggling colonies on marginal worlds. Human techniques, could save millions of lives. Furthermore, Luna added, we offer our services as couriers and traders. Our phase shift technology may be slower than hyperspace for long distances, but it's undetectable and can bypass any blockade. For species that have been cut off from trade by political disputes or geographical barriers, we can provide alternatives. It was a clever move. By offering unique services that only humans could provide, they made themselves valuable rather than just threatening. Several smaller species, those who had suffered under the current system, began to see opportunities rather than dangers. But not everyone was convinced. That night, in a secure chamber far from the council halls, representatives from the three major powers met in secret. The Zalathi, Forlac, and Kren had dominated the galaxy for millennia. They weren't about to let humans upset that balance. They must be eliminated, the Zalathi representative stated flatly. Their technology is too dangerous, their expansion too rapid. If we allow them to establish themselves, they'll upset the entire order. Agreed, the Kren chancellor rippled. But how? They've demonstrated abilities we don't understand. Our fleets could be walking into traps at every human world. Then, we don't use fleets, Battlemaster Krek suggested. We use economics, isolation, sabotage. The council may have granted them provisional membership, but that doesn't mean we have to make it easy for them. They began to plan, not knowing that their conversation was being observed. In a dimension slightly out of phase with normal space, a human operative listened to every word. The phase shift technology had applications beyond ships and weapons. It made perfect spies as well. Within hours, every human colony knew about the planned economic warfare. Countermeasures were prepared. Alliances were forged with smaller species who resented the major powers, and trade routes were established that bypassed the traditional networks entirely. The three powers had made a crucial mistake. They still thought in terms of traditional warfare, fleets, and blockades, and economic pressure. They didn't understand that humanity had spent 50 years preparing for every possible form of attack. Over the following months, their efforts to undermine humanity backfired spectacularly. Every trade restriction was circumvented by phase shift smugglers. Every attempt at sabotage was detected by sensors that could see into parallel dimensions. Every political move was countered by humans who had spent decades studying alien psychology and culture. Worse, their actions drove other species to side with humanity. The Quellian Trade Consortium, tired of being strong-armed by the major powers, signed exclusive agreements with human merchants. The Serloni, intrigued by human adaptability, opened their libraries to human scholars for the first time in centuries. Even some Korati commanders, impressed by human military innovation, began joint training exercises. 6 months into the provisional period, something unexpected happened. A distress call came from the Outer Veil, a region of space plagued by gravitational anomalies that made travel dangerous. A Zalathi colony ship had been caught in a gravity well, its engines failing, 20,000 colonists facing certain death. The Zalathi fleet couldn't reach them in time. The gravitational interference made hyperspace travel impossible, and conventional drives would take weeks. The colonists had days at most. But phase shift technology didn't use hyperspace. It slipped between dimensions where gravity worked differently. Without being asked, without negotiating for advantage, the human fleet responded. 12 ships phase shifted directly into the anomaly, something every other species had deemed impossible. They found a colony ship being torn apart by tidal forces, its hull already breaching in multiple places. What followed was 18 hours of desperate rescue operations. Human ships phase shifted in and out, evacuating colonists 100 at a time, racing against the inexorable pull of gravity. The human crews worked without rest, pushing their technology and themselves to the limit. When a colony ship finally came apart, scattered across 1,000,000 kilometers of twisted space, every single colonist was safe aboard human vessels. The rescued Zalathi were taken not to a human world, but directly to the nearest Zalathi colony. No demands were made. No payment was requested. The humans simply delivered them home and left. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The species they had tried to contain, that they had feared would be vengeful and aggressive, had risked their lives to save their enemies. Not for gain, not for political advantage, but because it was the right thing to do. The Zalathi representative stood before the council the next day, his crystalline form dim with shame. "I call for a vote," he said quietly. "Full membership for humanity. No restrictions. No conditions. They have proven themselves better than we are." The vote was unanimous. Ambassador Chen accepted on behalf of humanity with grace, making no mention of the months of sabotage attempts or the secret meeting she knew about. Luna Reyes stood beside her, representing the colonial generation who would build humanity's future among the stars. "We've all learned something these past months," Chen said in her acceptance speech. "You learned that humanity cannot be contained. We learned that we don't need to be. There's room in this galaxy for all of us if we're willing to share it." But even as celebrations began, new reports were coming in from the frontier. The phase shift technology had opened up regions of space previously thought unreachable. Human explorers were finding things in the spaces between spaces, ancient ruins that existed partially in other dimensions, energy sources that defied known physics, and signs that the galaxy held mysteries that no species had yet imagined. The age of human containment was over. The age of human integration had begun. But perhaps most importantly, the age of new exploration was dawning. Humanity's forced innovation had given the entire galaxy new tools to understand the universe. And in the deep void, in dimensions that touched reality at strange angles, things stirred that had been sleeping since before any current species had achieved sentience. The galaxy had thought humanity was the danger. They were about to discover that humanity might be their salvation against threats they couldn't yet imagine. The Pact had failed. The galaxy had watched. Humanity had struck not with fury, but with compassion. And in doing so, they had changed the course of galactic history forever. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chun looked at new reports from phase shift scouts and felt a chill run down her spine. The universe was bigger and stranger than anyone had imagined. Humanity's struggle for freedom might have been just the beginning. The real challenges lay ahead. The discovery that changed everything came from a human exploration team operating at the edge of known space. The ship Curiosity's dream had been testing the limits of phase shift technology, pushing into regions where space itself grew thin and reality became negotiable. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on her bridge, staring at sensor data that made no sense. "Run the scan again," she ordered, though she knew the results would be the same. Captain, her science officer, Dr. James Okafor, looked up from his station with barely contained excitement. "It's not an error. We're detecting structures that exist primarily in phase space. Artificial structures. Someone built these." The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical force. If true, this meant an ancient civilization had mastered phase shift technology long before humanity discovered it. More than mastered it, they had built entire installations that existed more in alternate dimensions than in normal space. "Send a priority message to Earth," Vasquez commanded, "and prepare a probe. We need to know what we're looking at." Within days, the discovery had set the entire galaxy ablaze with curiosity and concern. Human phase shift technology had been shocking enough. The possibility that it was actually rediscovered technology, that some ancient race had built an interdimensional civilization, changed everything. A joint expedition was hastily assembled. For the first time in galactic history, all major species contributed resources to a single mission. The location was too dangerous for hyperspace travel, making human phase shift ships essential. But everyone wanted their scientists present when they explored what the media was already calling the ghost ruins. Ambassador Chun watched from Earth as former enemies worked side by side. The Zalathi provided their best archaeologists. The Forlax sent military escorts. The Kren contributed their unmatched sensor technology. The Korati offered tactical expertise, and humanity provided the only ships capable of reaching the site. Funny how the prospect of ancient mysteries makes everyone forget their grudges, Admiral Sarathichin observed, watching the expedition prep from her command center. Not everyone, Her aide warned, pulling up intelligence reports. We're detecting unusual activity in several frontier systems. Someone's moving assets quietly. Sarah frowned. While public attention focused on the expedition, someone was taking advantage of the distraction. But who? And why? The answer came from an unexpected source. Marcus Chun, the human who had spent years running a small shipping office on the Nexus Point, contacted them through quantum-encrypted channels. His network of humans hidden throughout alien society had noticed something disturbing. It's not any of the major powers, he reported. It's the consortium. The hegemonic consortium was a loose alliance of merchant species that controlled much of the galaxy's economy. They had stayed neutral during the human revelation, neither supporting nor opposing humanity's integration. Now, apparently, they had their own agenda. They're moving military assets toward the ghost ruins, Marcus continued. Whatever's out there, they want it for themselves. Sarah cursed quietly. The consortium had always been about profit over politics. If they thought the ruins contained advanced technology they could monopolize, they wouldn't hesitate to seize it. Alert the expedition, she ordered, and prepare contingency plans. This is about to get complicated. Meanwhile, the joint expedition had reached the coordinates where the Curiosity's dream had made its discovery. What they found defied every expectation. The ghost ruins weren't ruins in any conventional sense. They were a vast network of structures that existed partially in normal space and partially in up to 11 different phase dimensions simultaneously. From any single dimensional viewpoint, they looked like scattered, broken fragments. But when viewed through phase shift sensors, they formed an interconnected city of impossible architecture. It's beautiful, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, humanity's lead archaeologist, breathed as she studied the readings. They didn't just use phase shift technology. They built a civilization that transcended dimensional boundaries. The Zalathi archaeologist, despite months of tension with humans, found himself agreeing. The mathematical precision required. It's beyond anything we've achieved. This civilization was millions of years ahead of us. Exploration teams suited up, preparing to enter the ruins. But as the first shuttle approached the nearest structure, alarms screamed across the fleet. Hyperspace emergence, the tactical officer announced. Multiple signatures, it's the consortium fleet. 40 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Unlike the exploratory vessels of the expedition, these were clearly military craft, weapons powered, and shields raised. This is Tradarg Vex of the hegemonic consortium, a grating voice announced over all channels. These ruins are now under consortium control. All non-consortium vessels will withdraw immediately. Captain Vasquez, commanding the expedition fleet, responded calmly. This is a joint scientific expedition sanctioned by the Galactic Council. You have no authority here, Tradarch. Authority comes from power, Vex replied. And we have more ships. Withdraw or be destroyed. It was the moment everyone had feared since humanity's revelation. The breakdown of galactic order as species scrambled for advantage. The consortium had decided that ancient phase shift technology was worth starting a war. But they had made a critical miscalculation. They assumed human ships were just transports, not warships. They didn't know that every human vessel was built for combat, that phase shift technology made them nearly impossible to target, or that the expedition had contingencies for exactly this scenario. All human vessels, execute Phantom Protocol, Vasquez ordered quietly. To the consortium's sensors, it looked like the human ships simply vanished. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, leaving only the alien research vessels apparently defenseless. Tradarg Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The cowards flee. Now, surrender your ships and prepare to be boarded. I don't think so. Vasquez's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The human ships hadn't fled. They had phase shifted just enough to be invisible to standard sensors while remaining in position. Now, they revealed themselves, not where they had been, but surrounding the consortium fleet in a perfect sphere. Interesting thing about phase shift technology, Vasquez continued conversationally. We can deploy weapons in dimensions you can't even see. Right now, every one of your ships is bracketed by phase mines. Make any aggressive move, and we'll demonstrate why humanity earned its freedom. The standoff stretched taut. 40 consortium warships against 12 human vessels and a handful of research ships. In conventional terms, the consortium had overwhelming advantage. But conventional terms no longer applied. Then, the ghost ruins made the decision for everyone. The ancient structures suddenly blazed with light, not in normal space, but across all dimensional phases simultaneously. Energy patterns that hadn't been active for millions of years sparked to life. The expedition's sensors went wild, detecting power signatures that dwarfed anything in known space. "Something's happening," Dr. Okafor reported urgently. They're responding to something. On every ship, human and alien alike, the same message appeared in their respective languages. Not transmitted, but somehow written directly onto their displays. Conflict detected. Assessment initiated. Stand by for judgment. The ghost ruins began to move. Structures that had seemed dead and broken flowed like liquid through dimensions, reconfiguring into new patterns. A massive construct assembled itself in the center of the formation. Part physical, part energy, part something else entirely. From his construct, scanning beams swept across every ship present. But these weren't ordinary scans. Everyone touched by the beams felt them, a presence in their minds that examined not just their technology, but their intentions, their history, their very souls. When the beams faded, another message appeared. Assessment complete. Hegemonic consortium. Aggressive intent detected. Access denied. Human expedition. Defensive posture confirmed. Scientific intent verified. Limited access granted. The consortium fleet suddenly found itself being pushed away by an irresistible force. Not violently, but implacably. Their engines strained uselessly against whatever the ruins were doing. Within minutes, they were beyond weapons range and accelerating despite their best efforts to stop. "What's happening?" Tradarch Vex demanded. "What is this?" "Justice," Captain Vasquez replied. Apparently the builders of this place had strong opinions about grave robbers. But for the expedition, the real shock was yet to come. A pathway opened in the ruins, a corridor of stable space leading to the central construct. The invitation was clear. A small team was assembled. Captain Vasquez, Dr. Tanaka, Dr. Okafor, and representatives from each allied species. As their shuttle approached the construct, everyone held their breath. The interior was impossible. Spaces that folded in on themselves. Rooms that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Architecture that human minds could barely process, and alien consciousness found equally challenging. At the center, they found it. Not a room or a chamber, but a space that existed outside normal dimensional constraints. And within that space, a message waited. Not words or images, but pure meaning that transcended language. The builders of this place had faced the same challenge humanity just overcame. Powerful species trying to contain them, to limit their growth. They had developed phase shift technology as humanity had, out of necessity and desperation. But they had gone further, much further. The message showed them glimpses of what the builders had become. A civilization that existed across dimensions, that had transcended physical limitations entirely. They had left these ruins as a test and a gift for any species that could find them, but only for those who came in peace and curiosity, not conquest. "They're offering us knowledge," Dr. Tanaka whispered. "Not just technology, but understanding. How to use phase shift technology to its full potential. But there's a warning," the Zalathi archaeologist added, his crystalline form pulsing with awe. "This knowledge comes with responsibility. Use it for war or domination, and it will destroy us." The team exchanged glances. Humans and aliens who had been enemies months before, now united by discovery. The decision was unanimous. They accepted. What followed was not a download of data, but a transformation of understanding. Each team member experienced it differently. For some, It was like suddenly understanding a language they'd never heard. For others, like seeing colors that had always been invisible. When they emerged from the ruins hours later, they were changed. Not physically, but in their comprehension of what was possible. "We need to share this," Captain Vasquez said immediately. "All of it. With everyone. Some might have hoarded such knowledge, used it for advantage. But humanity had learned the price of isolation and secrecy. They had won their freedom through unity and determination. Now they would share that gift. The knowledge from the ghost ruins revolutionized galactic civilization. Phase shift technology, which humanity had discovered in its crudest form, proved to be the key to unimaginable advancement. Medical techniques that could heal by adjusting dimensional phase. Energy sources that drew power from the spaces between spaces. Transportation that made even hyperspace seem primitive. But more than technology, the ruins had provided wisdom. The builder's message was clear: grow together or fall separately. The galaxy had tried to contain humanity and nearly destroyed itself. Now, working together, they could transcend limitations none could overcome alone. The consortium's attempted seizure proved to be their downfall. The other species, disgusted by their greed and aggression, revoked their trade privileges. Within a year, the hegemonic consortium had dissolved, its member species either reforming or being absorbed by more cooperative groups. Humanity, meanwhile, found itself at the center of a new golden age. Not as conquerors or leaders, but as catalysts. Their struggle for freedom had forced them to innovate. Their innovation had led to discovery. Their discovery had opened doors for everyone. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in her command center, now expanded to coordinate not just human defenses, but joint expeditions to other ghost ruin sites discovered across the galaxy. The weapons remained, trust took time to build, but they were no longer the focus. Report from the Andromeda expedition. An aide announced. They found another builder site. This one's even bigger. Sarah smiled. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for war, only to become pioneers of peace. They had been contained, so they learned to be free. They had been isolated, so they learned to unite. They had been limited, so they learned to transcend. The Pact had failed because it tried to cage human potential. The galaxy had watched as that potential broke free. And when humanity struck, it wasn't with the fury of vengeance, but with the determination of a species that refused to be limited. Now, as ships of every species worked together to unlock the secrets of the universe, one truth echoed across the stars. You cannot contain the future. You can only choose whether to be part of it. The age of separation was over. The age of transcendence had begun. And in the deep spaces between dimensions, the builders watched with something like approval. The test had been passed. The young races were ready for the next step. The universe was vast and full of wonders. And finally, after so much struggle and pain, the galaxy was ready to explore it together. 5 years had passed since the ghost ruins changed everything. The galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Human phase shift technology, enhanced by the builders' knowledge, had opened frontiers beyond imagination. But with progress came new challenges. Admiral Sarah Chun stood aboard the dimensional observatory orbiting Earth, watching data streams that would have been incomprehensible years earlier. Ships moved through phase space like dolphins through water. Colonies sprouted on worlds that existed partially in other dimensions. Trade routes cut through reality itself. "Ma'am," her aide interrupted, "we're receiving reports from the Void Watchers. They detected something." The Void Watchers were a new organization, joint-staffed by all species, tasked with monitoring the spaces between dimensions. As phase shift travel became common, they had started noticing irregularities. "Put on the main display," Sarah ordered. What appeared made everyone on the bridge freeze. In the deep void between galactic arms, something vast moved through phase space. Not a ship or fleet, but something organic, something alive. And it was heading toward inhabited space. "Size estimate?" Sarah asked quietly. "Approximately 300 kilometers in length," the aide responded. "But that's just what we can detect. Parts of it exist in dimensions we can't fully scan." Sarah activated the quantum communication network, instantly connecting with leaders across the galaxy. Within minutes, representatives from every major species were virtually present. "We've designated it Leviathan," Sarah began without preamble. "It's moving at phase-shift velocities we didn't think were possible for something that size. At current speed, it will reach the outer colonies in 6 months." "Is it a ship?" the Zalathi representative asked, his crystalline form flickering with concern. "No," Dr. James Okafor answered. He had become humanity's leading expert on dimensional biology. "It's definitely organic, but unlike anything in our databases, it seems to exist naturally in multiple dimensions simultaneously." The implications were staggering. Life that had evolved in phase space itself. The Builder's ruins had hinted at such possibilities, but this was confirmation. "Is it hostile?" Battlemaster Krex of the Forlac asked, ever the warrior. "Unknown," Sarah admitted. "But we need to prepare for all possibilities." What followed was unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of individual species scrambling to protect themselves, they worked together. Human phase-shift technology, Zalathi crystal harmonics, Forlac military doctrine, Kryn biological expertise, Korti tactical analysis, all combined into a unified response. Luna Reyes, now an admiral herself, commanded the first interdimensional fleet from the dreadnought Transcendent. Ships from every species flew in formation, their technologies integrated through human Neuralink networks that had been freely shared. "Remember," she addressed her multi-species crew, "we're explorers first, warriors second. We make contact if possible. We defend if necessary." As the fleet moved to intercept Leviathan, smaller dramas played out across the galaxy. On the Nexus Point, now a thriving hub of interdimensional trade, Marcus Chun watched his screens with satisfaction. The shipping office that had been his cover now genuinely coordinated transport between dimensions. Former spies had become legitimate business people, their skills redirected to building rather than hiding. On Earth, Ambassador Chun, now Secretary General of the Interdimensional Alliance, worked to maintain the fragile unity. Not everyone had embraced the new age. Factions within every species resented the changes, yearned for the old days of clear hierarchies, and contained threats. "The purist movement is gaining strength," her security advisor warned. "They're calling for a return to species isolation, abandoning phase-shift technology entirely." "Fear of the unknown," Chun sighed. "Always humanity's greatest enemy. And, apparently, everyone else's too." The purists had emerged as phase-space exploration revealed just how vast and strange the universe truly was. The ghost ruins were just the beginning. Explorer teams found evidence of dozens of ancient civilizations that had transcended physical existence. Dimensional storms that could rewrite reality. Spaces where the laws of physics became suggestions. And now life forms like Leviathan, one that treated dimensions like humans treated oceans. "We can't go backward," Chin said firmly. "We tried isolation. It nearly destroyed us all. Whatever's out there, we face it together." 3 months into their journey, the first interdimensional fleet detected something else. More Leviathans. Dozens of them, moving in what could only be described as a pod. And they were communicating not through any electromagnetic spectrum, but through phase space itself, sending ripples through dimensions. "It's beautiful," Dr. Yuki Tanaka breathed, watching the patterns on her screen. "They're singing." The dimensional songs of the Leviathans touched every phase sensitive on the fleet. Humans who had grown up in phase-shifted colonies. Zalathi, whose crystalline structures resonated with dimensional harmonics. Even some Kryn who had adapted to phase space through biological mutation. The songs told a story. The Leviathans were older than any current civilization. They had witnessed the rise and fall of the Builders. They had swum through dimensions while the galaxy species were still developing consciousness. They were not invaders or conquerors. They were migrants. "Their dimensional habitat is failing," Luna reported to the Emergency Council. "Something is causing phase-space storms in their region. They're looking for a new home." Refugees, the eldest of the Serloni mused. The universe's oldest refugees, fleeing a catastrophe we don't understand. The moral challenge was immediate. The Leviathans needed vast amounts of phase space to survive. Their presence would make large areas unsuitable for phase shift travel or dimensional colonies. Accepting them meant sacrificing territory humanity and others had only just learned to use. The debate raged across the galaxy. The purists saw it as validation. Phase shift technology had brought nothing but danger. Others argued for compassion, remembering how humanity had been refugees in their own solar system. The deciding moment came from an unexpected source. The ghost ruins, dormant since their first activation, suddenly came alive. Every site across the galaxy transmitted the same message. The test continues. Choose fear or growth, isolation or unity, the past or the future. Captain Vasquez, who had led the first expedition, was aboard the fleet when the message arrived. It's another test, she realized. The builders faced the same choice. Do we help others transcend, or do we guard what we have? The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone liked. But, in the end, hope won over fear. The Interdimensional Alliance offered the Leviathans sanctuary in the spaces between inhabited systems. It would require massive adjustment, rerouting of phase shift lanes, and acceptance of being so alien that communication was barely possible. But they had learned. Containment bred resentment. Isolation led to stagnation. The only path forward was together. The integration wasn't easy. There were accidents, ships that phase shifted into Leviathan migration paths, colonies disrupted by dimensional wake. But there were also miracles. The Leviathan's deep understanding of phase space led to breakthrough technologies. Their songs, when properly translated, contained knowledge about the universe's hidden dimensions that no physical species had imagined. 1 year after first contact, Luna stood on the bridge of her ship, watching human and alien crews work alongside beings that existed partially in other dimensions. It was chaotic, challenging, and occasionally terrifying. It was also wonderful. My grandfather fled Earth on a generation ship, she told her mixed-species bridge crew. He died believing his sacrifice would give his children freedom. He never imagined this. Below them, a young Leviathan played in the phase wake of their ship, only 100 kilometers long, a baby by their standards. It had been born in Allied space, the first of its kind to know no home, but the one offered by former enemies working together. On Earth, Sarah Chun retired from active service, spending her days teaching at the academy where humans and aliens learned to navigate the new reality together. Her final speech to graduating cadets became legendary. We spent 50 years preparing for war because they feared us. They spent 50 years fearing us because they didn't understand us. Both sides wasted lifetimes on containment and suspicion. Learn from our mistakes. The universe is vast and full of wonders and terrors. Face them together or face them alone. But face them. Always forward, never back. The Pact had failed because it tried to limit potential. The galaxy had watched as that potential exploded beyond all constraints. Humanity had struck not with weapons, but with determination, not with vengeance, but with vision. And in doing so, they had transformed not just their own destiny, but the destiny of every species they encountered. The age of separate species jealously guarding their territories was ending. The age of transcendent cooperation had begun. In the deep spaces between dimensions, the builders watched and approved. The young races had passed the greater test. They had chosen growth over safety, unity over division, the unknown over the familiar. The universe spread before them, infinite and terrifying and beautiful. And they would explore it together, each species bringing their unique gifts to the whole. Humanity's gift had been the catalyst, the stubborn refusal to accept limitations that had forced everyone to think bigger. Ambassador Chun, in her final days, received a message through dimensions from the builders themselves. Just 4 words, but they carried the weight of eons. Welcome, T.O., the beginning. The Pact had failed. The galaxy had watched. Humanity had struck. And, in striking, they had shattered not just their own chains, but the chains that bound all thinking beings to their small corners of an infinite universe. The stars beckoned, the dimensions sang, and a galaxy of species, led by the ones they had tried to contain, stepped forward into a future without limits. Together,